old stage managed idea of how politicians work. People who are watching this at the moment can see Starmer and Rachel Reeves standing there awkwardly having something explained to them.
And the more he tries to look human, the less human he looks.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And in an era where I think the amount of social media that's around, the fact that every single person has a mobile phone in their pockets where they can record things all the time and share all their thoughts and all the rest of it, that kind of wooden performance just doesn't really work anymore. When you've got Trump, who is so eager and happy to take every question under the sun and talk for hours and all the rest of it, I think we're going to start craving people who've got a level of authenticity.
Starmer's Labour just stabbed grooming gang victims in the back. Right before Easter recess, they quietly scrapped dedicated inquiries into these horrific crimes, hoping nobody would notice. But Britain has noticed, from Tory MP Robbie Moore calling it a complete and utter disgrace, to victims' advocates demanding answers. The backlash is building. This isn't just political theatre. It's about justice for thousands of vulnerable children who've been failed by the system. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favour. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video.
When the work will actually begin, there's no chance of it being ready at the moment before 2031. So why is he getting so excited about it? Why? It's not even a Labour policy, it's not even a Labour project. It was started years ago. There's no actual news whatsoever about when the first sort of spade will be dug into the ground.
That's a very good question. I mean, it's, I suppose, an insight into how government works. You have grim issue to deal with after grim issue to deal with, and I've got sympathy for anybody.
Before the election, Labour made grand promises to the victims of grooming gangs across Britain. They vowed dedicated inquiries that would finally deliver justice, uncover systemic failures, and hold perpetrators accountable. Starmer himself stood before cameras with a solemn face, pledging to leave no stone unturned in the pursuit of justice for these survivors. These weren't casual promises, they represented hope for thousands of victims who had been systematically ignored for decades. But what happens when the spotlight dims and the cameras stop rolling? The true nature of political commitment reveals itself. In a move that can only be described as calculated deception, the Labour government announced they were scrapping these promised inquiries. And when did they make this announcement? Just hours before Parliament broke for Easter recess, a classic political manoeuvre to minimise scrutiny and avoid uncomfortable questions from opposition MPs.
The grooming gang scandal, the grooming gang's shame, which a lot of people are calling, including Trevor Phillips, who's hardly, a rabid Tory looking to attack the Labour government at every opportunity.
Are real people who actually mean what they say and actually think about things and care about things, because we've seen so little of that for so long.
Well, because also when you see, and some people, they do this the day after a really, really cynical announcement that was made literally 40 minutes away from Parliament closing for Easter, that we're not going to do a grooming gang inquiry.
Instead of the robust, legally empowered inquiries promised, victims are now being offered a vague, flexible fund for local authorities. Let's be clear about what this means. No power to compel witnesses, no ability to examine the national patterns that enabled these crimes, and critically, no mechanism to investigate the immigration enforcement failures that allowed perpetrators to remain in the country despite convictions. MP Robbie Moore didn't mince words when he said the issue had been kicked into the long grass, political speak for indefinitely delayed until public attention moves elsewhere. His anger reflected the betrayal felt by constituents who had placed their trust in Labour's promises, only to see them evaporate once power was secured.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And there's a perfect example. Anybody with a single shred of humanity would look at the issue of these disgusting, evil, mostly Pakistani-led rape gangs.
We're just going to let the local people take care of it. We'll give them the money. They can spend it in any way they want. Jess Phillips, the woman who's meant to be the great saviour of women and girls in this country. And you just think, are they really that cynical? And I'm beginning to wonder if they are.
That is still going on to this day, let's not forget about that, would put politics aside, right? There's plenty of time to hammer the Tories on it later down the line if that's what they want to do.
When confronted about this stunning reversal, Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips offered a defensive statement, claiming the new approach would be more effective. Yet her explanation conspicuously avoided addressing how victims would get justice without the legal powers of a formal inquiry. The evasiveness speaks volumes about the government's priorities, and justice for victims isn't among them. This betrayal raises a disturbing question. Is this a one-off policy reversal, or are we witnessing the emergence of a pattern? Labour's pre-election manifesto seems increasingly like a work of fiction rather than a blueprint for governance. The calculated timing of this announcement, when scrutiny would be minimal, suggests a government that knows it's breaking fundamental promises but hopes to do so without consequence. The cynicism is breathtaking. Release controversial news when Parliament is emptying out, when journalists are winding down for the holiday, when the news cycle is distracted. It's a textbook example of how to bury bad news, and it reveals a government more concerned with managing perception than delivering justice. This pattern of burying bad news extends far beyond the grooming gang inquiries, with a storm of public fury now engulfing Starmer from an unexpected direction. The initial political criticism has morphed into a nationwide movement of outrage, spreading rapidly through victims' advocacy groups, community organisations, and across social media platforms where ordinary citizens are expressing their disillusionment in unprecedented numbers. What could possibly cause such a dramatic 16-point collapse in support among disabled voters, a group that has traditionally backed Labour for decades? The answer lies in Starmer's proposed changes to personal independence payment benefits, a move that has been described by James Taylor, Executive Director of Strategy at Disability Charity Scope, as nothing short of a catastrophe that would penalise some of society's most vulnerable citizens. The numbers tell a story that no parliamentary manoeuvring can hide. Recent polling data reveals a political earthquake, with Reform UK now leading among disabled voters at 29%, while Labour trails behind at just 20%. This represents a staggering 16 percentage point drop for Labour since the last general election, where they received 36% of the vote from this demographic. The message couldn't be clearer. A key Labour voting bloc feels betrayed and abandoned. These PIP benefit reforms, projected to slash the welfare bill by £5 billion annually by 2030, aren't just unpopular among those directly affected. A survey conducted by the More in Common non-profit organisation found that the majority of the British public stands firmly opposed to these cuts. This widespread opposition suggests Starmer has fundamentally misjudged the national mood, pursuing policies that alienate not just traditional Labour voters, but the broader electorate. The simultaneous betrayal of grooming gang victims and targeting of disabled citizens with benefit cuts has created a perfect storm of public outrage. Both issues strike at the heart of what many have believed Labour stood for: protection of the vulnerable and pursuit of justice. Instead, the government appears willing to sacrifice these principles for financial expediency and political convenience. What we're witnessing isn't simply dissatisfaction with isolated policy decisions, but something far more dangerous for Starmer's leadership: a fundamental breach of trust that cuts across demographic and political lines. The unified opposition suggests a deeper crisis of confidence in a government that promised to be different, but is increasingly seen as continuing the worst tendencies of its predecessors. Starmer's deafening silence speaks volumes about his leadership style. In the face of public outrage over both the downgrading of grooming gang inquiries and the assault on disability benefits, Number 10 remains a fortress of secrecy. No press conferences, no explanations, just a wall of silence that betrays a fundamental disconnect from the people who put him in power. This perfect storm of betrayal has awakened something in the British public that politicians fear most: genuine cross-demographic fury that transcends party lines. The question hanging over Westminster isn't if Starmer will respond, but whether any response can repair this catastrophic breach of trust.